success at Temple is impressive, and Rhule's success at Baylor, certainly impressive. What Rhule was unable to do in Carolina, he should just say, you know what, I made some mistakes. I couldn't figure out the quarterback position. There were a few things I would have done differently. And taking the Nebraska job is a chance for him to go back to college where he had success. And some guys are just wired better for college. I think the guys that are wired better for college are usually a little egomaniacal. I think are usually more control freaks. You can control university programs. You can't really control a professional franchise. Ultimately, there's a GM usually above you in the NFL. Usually, always, there is an owner that pulls the strings. And no matter what coach you are, you're rarely, if ever, superior to the owner. I mean, I would say even Bill Belichick has to answer to Robert Kraft when Kraft wants something, and that's Bill freaking Belichick. But in college, you're usually the most powerful person on campus, if not in your state. I mean, Nick Saban doesn't get told what to do. So the egomaniacs, the control freaks, the guys that like to boss people around, they stay in college. They're better there. You can't boss around professional athletes. Can't really boss around an owner. So that's why the Sabans of the world, the Spurriers of the world, the college guys, the Bobby Petrinos, what do they all have in common? Usually they're control freaks, and they like to be in control, and they like to have the power. Power.
Bop, ba-da-da, bop, bop, bop.
Power.
Bop, ba-da-da, bop, bop, bop.
Power. So Rhule is doing this victory tour. Oh, it's going to be great. And again, for Nebraska, what's there to lose here? You're hiring a guy that had other interest, I'm sure, around the country. You're at your lowest moment, and you just tried a guy that's already been part of the culture in Scott Frost, and it was a flaming disaster. So hiring Matt Rhule, I'm not sure it's a slam dunk, but totally get why you would do that, and I don't blame Nebraska for going down that road. But here is Matt Rhule. And by the way, it's not going to be a quick fix at Nebraska either. There's time that's going to be needed to let this thing build, but you're in the Big Ten West, which is palatable, certainly, considering who's out of the Big Ten West playing this weekend? Purdue. So it's not exactly the most difficult of paths in the Big Ten West. Anyway, he's on Peter Schrager's podcast. Schrager is an NFL reporter, one of the hosts of Good Morning Football. And Matt Rhule is asked by Peter Schrager what he would do differently because of his lack of success in Carolina. And
if you could do it all over again, what would be the one thing you would change looking back on it, as obviously it didn't work out with Super Bowl victories or anything like that?
I think I probably would just taking another job. I mean, I think it's a great place, the wonderful people, but I just don't know if I was a fit there. At the end of the day, we talked about, hey, we're going to have a 4-year plan, a 5-year plan. If you tell me, hey, we got a 2-year plan, then I'm going to go sign a bunch of free agents and do it.
Mm-hmm. So Matt Rhule wouldn't have done anything differently in Carolina except take a different job. And the longer that clip goes, he goes on to say, had he thought it was only a 4 or 5, if it was only a 3-year plan or a 2.5-year plan, he would have signed bigger free agents and tried to fix it right away. But he was under the assumption that it was going to take 4 or 5 years of patience, and that was the understanding with David Tepper, et cetera. And that's fine. I could totally understand if there was a conversation with Tepper early before that the contract was signed, and I could totally understand if Matt Rhule felt as though, there was an understanding that we need some time here. We need 4 years minimum, 5 years to finally turn this thing around, so it's a slow build. But there are some holes in that theory. Because if Matt Rhule was under the assumption that this was a 5-year plan, what was going on at quarterback? If he was under the impression that the first 2 or 3 years were gimmies, why would you recycle back Cam Newton for 2 weeks? Why would you have gotten rid of Teddy Bridgewater? Why would you have tried Sam Darnold and then said, oh, no, we don't like Sam Darnold. We now need Baker Mayfield. Why would you have gone so hectic at every quarterback situation? That doesn't make any sense. If you thought this was a 5-year plan, why would you trade a second rounder for Sam Darnold? That feels like we need a winner right now. That feels like we need a solution right now. And patience? What patience do they show in any regard at the quarterback position? So I don't really buy it. I think maybe 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago around this time, the conversation was, we understand slow build, slow growth. We want this to be a long-term solution. But the fact is, year one, you basically get a gimme. You go 5-11. And year two, ownership and fans wanted to see something. And you showed them no growth because you went 5-12 the next year. So then year three, which is the year that you seem to take off at Temple, you seem to take off at Baylor, year three, okay, this is the year, looks just like the other years. They are showing no signs of growth. In fact, at times, they looked worse. Now, is David Tepper impatient as a billionaire? Probably. Did David Tepper change his tune 2.5 years into this marriage? Probably. But I could also understand hiring a guy and thinking, well, it'll be rough at the beginning, but we'll see signs. And there were no signs. I mean, look at the quarterback situation this year. Year three was, we've got Darnold, but we need Baker Mayfield. We're drafting Matt Corral, and we might still need P.J. Walker. What kind of plan is that? If you hire somebody at a CEO level, a boss position, and by year three, it looks just like it did in year one, and year three still kind of seems like we're throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what works, you too would be impatient. So this is the bit. Matt Rhule apparently treated a lot of people well. Fine. That's good. That should be the bare minimum, but it's not always the bare minimum. So he treated people around the facility well. That's good. But he also thinks really highly of himself, and so highly of himself that he is unable to actually see that he was part of the problem too. It might not have been totally his fault, but there's certainly, if you've got control over everything and year three looks like year one, sorry, that's also on you, bud. So I tend to think Matt Rhule's overrated. We'll see it in Nebraska. There's not a lot of pressure. I mean, they've been so bad for so long that as long as they go 7-5, if they get to 8-4, I mean, forget it. I mean, he's a hero. Honestly, if they're 6-6 next year and qualify for the Bahamas Bowl, it's good. The Big Ten might not have a tie into the Bahamas Bowl, but you know what I'm saying. He doesn't need to do much. And transfer portal these days, I mean, hell, Kansas has a winning season. Syracuse went 7-5. So he might be able to do it. Do I think that he's this great solution to bringing Nebraska back? I do not. I do not think he's that good.